In the summer of 1889, Dr. Helena Morrison discovered that room 23 on the third floor of McAllister Asylum had been sealed for 15 years. When she demanded the key, the head orderly's hands trembled as he whispered, "Some doors should never be opened, Doctor." What she found behind that door would reveal why the most respected psychiatric institution in upstate New York had maintained such a dark secret for so long. Before we continue with the story of Dr. Morrison's terrifying discovery, I want to ask you to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this one. Hit that like button if you enjoy dark mysteries, and tell us in the comments what city and country you're watching from. Your support helps us bring you these forgotten tales from history's darkest corners. But what exactly was hidden in that room, and why had an entire institution conspired to keep it sealed? According to local records and testimonies that have survived to this day, the truth behind room 23 began long before Dr. Morrison ever set foot in McAllister Asylum. The town of Millbrook, nestled in the rolling hills of Dutchess County, New York, had always been a quiet place where families knew each other for generations. By the 1880s, this small community of barely 3,000 souls had become home to one of the state's most progressive psychiatric institutions. The McAllister Asylum for the mentally afflicted stood like a Gothic cathedral on the hill overlooking the town, its red brick towers and arched windows giving it an air of both grandeur and foreboding. Dr. Cornelius McAllister had founded the institution in 1867, bringing with him revolutionary ideas about treating mental illness through what he called controlled therapeutic environments. The asylum quickly gained a reputation throughout the Northeast for its modern approach to psychiatric care. Wealthy families from New York City, Boston, and Philadelphia would send their troubled relatives to McAllister's care, confident that his methods represented the cutting edge of medical science. Dr. Helena Morrison arrived in Millbrook on a humid July morning in 1889, her medical bag in one hand and her appointment letter in the other. At 32, she was one of the few women to have earned a medical degree from Columbia College, specializing in nervous disorders and hysteria. The asylum's board of directors had hired her to modernize their treatment protocols after Dr. McAllister's sudden death the previous winter. The staff she inherited seemed capable enough. Thomas Brennan, the head orderly, had worked at the asylum since its opening and knew every patient's case by heart. Nurse Margaret O'Sullivan ran the women's ward with efficient compassion, while Dr. James Whitmore handled the male patients with what appeared to be genuine concern for their welfare. Yet from her first day, Helena sensed an undercurrent of unease among the staff, as if they were all guarding some unspoken secret. The asylum housed 43 patients in 1889, ranging from melancholic young women to elderly men suffering from what was then called senile dementia. The daily routine was structured but humane. Patients attended chapel services, worked in the garden, and participated in group discussions about their conditions. It all seemed remarkably progressive for its time, which made Helena wonder why the previous director's methods had been so celebrated yet so mysterious. On her third day, while reviewing the asylum's floor plans in preparation for her inspection, Helena noticed something peculiar. The third floor showed 24 rooms, but during her walkthrough, she had only seen 23. Room 23, according to the architectural drawings, should have been located at the end of the eastern corridor, yet that hallway terminated in what appeared to be a blank wall, covered by the same burgundy wallpaper as the rest of the floor. When she questioned Thomas Brennan about the discrepancy, the usually talkative orderly became unusually quiet. "There's no room 23, Doctor," he said, avoiding her eyes. "Must be an error in the old plans." But Helena was thorough by nature. That evening she examined the exterior of the building and confirmed that there was indeed space for another room where the plans indicated. The next morning, she pressed the issue with Nurse O'Sullivan, who had been with the asylum for 12 years. "Oh, that room," Margaret said, her Irish accent becoming more pronounced as it always did when she was nervous. "We don't speak of it, Doctor. Dr. McAllister's orders. God rest his soul." The more Helena investigated, the more evasive the staff became. Dr. Whitmore claimed he had never paid attention to the architectural details. The kitchen staff crossed themselves when she mentioned the third floor's eastern wing. Even the patients seemed to sense something was amiss. Several of them had mentioned hearing crying from the wall during their more lucid moments. It was Mrs. Elizabeth Hartwell, a 70-year-old patient suffering from periodic confusion, who finally provided the first real clue. During one of her clearer moments, she grabbed Helena's hand and whispered, "The doctor's room is still there, behind the wall. I can hear him working sometimes late at night. The screaming stopped long ago, but he's still working." Helena's inquiries about Dr. McAllister's methods revealed a complex picture. The town's physicians spoke of him with reverence, praising his innovative approaches to treating mental illness. Dr. Samuel Rogers, who had worked closely with McAllister in the asylum's early years, described him as a man ahead of his time, willing to explore treatments that others deemed too radical. Yet when Helena pressed for specifics about these radical treatments, the details became frustratingly vague. The asylum's medical records from the 1870s were surprisingly incomplete, with several years showing gaps in patient documentation. Death certificates from that period listed causes as heart failure or complications from nervous exhaustion, but the actual treatment records were missing. The local newspaper archives provided some insight. The Millbrook Gazette had published several articles between 1874 and 1878 praising the asylum's success rates, noting that patients who had been considered hopeless cases elsewhere showed remarkable improvement under Dr. McAllister's care. However, Helena noticed that many of these success stories involved patients who had been discharged to private family care with no follow-up documentation. Thomas Brennan, after much coaxing, finally revealed that room 23 had been Dr. McAllister's private treatment chamber. He used special methods there, the orderly explained, his voice barely above a whisper. Methods that required absolute privacy and silence. After 1878, he sealed the room and forbade anyone from entering. Said his work there was complete. The year 1878 seemed significant. Helena discovered that the asylum's mortality rate had dropped dramatically after that date, but so had its admission rate. Families who had once eagerly sent their troubled relatives to McAllister's care began seeking treatment elsewhere. The asylum's financial records showed a corresponding decline in revenue, forcing Dr. McAllister to reduce his staff and accept fewer patients. Helena's investigation took on new urgency when she discovered a locked cabinet in Dr. McAllister's former office. Inside, she found a collection of journals dating from 1871 to 1878, written in the doctor's precise handwriting. The entries documented his growing frustration with conventional treatments and his determination to find more decisive interventions for severe cases of mental illness. The journals revealed Dr. McAllister's obsession with the theories of Dr. Benjamin Rush, who had advocated for extreme measures in treating psychiatric patients. McAllister had become convinced that certain forms of mental illness could only be cured through complete sensory deprivation and psychological isolation. He wrote extensively about his plans to create a therapeutic environment where patients could be subjected to controlled stimulus withdrawal. The entries became increasingly disturbing as they progressed. McAllister described constructing specialized equipment in room 23, including restraining devices that would prevent any movement and sound-dampening materials that would create total silence. He believed that by removing all external stimuli, he could force the mind to reset itself and emerge cured of its afflictions. The final entries, dated in late 1878, were the most chilling. McAllister wrote about achieving breakthrough results with several patients, describing their complete psychological reconstruction as a triumph of medical science. However, he also noted that these successes came at a necessary cost that the broader medical community might not understand. Helena found invoices for unusual materials delivered to the asylum during this period. Sound-dampening cork panels, specially designed leather restraints, and what appeared to be sensory deprivation masks. The suppliers were all located in distant cities, suggesting that McAllister had gone to great lengths to keep his methods secret. The breakthrough came when Helena discovered a hidden correspondence between Dr. McAllister and several prominent families whose relatives had been treated at the asylum. The letters, hidden behind a loose panel in McAllister's desk, revealed a shocking arrangement. Wealthy families were paying enormous sums not for treatment, but for permanent custody of relatives whose mental illness had become an embarrassment. The letters made it clear that these families understood their loved ones would never return home. In exchange for their silence and continued financial support, Dr. McAllister provided them with regular reports describing their relatives' peaceful lives at the asylum. The families, in turn, spread word about the asylum's miraculous cure rates to maintain its reputation. Helena's hands shook as she read a letter from Mrs. Victoria Ashford of New York City, dated September 1876. Dr. McAllister, we are grateful for your discretion regarding our daughter Catherine's condition. As agreed, we will continue our monthly payments and expect no further contact. Please ensure that she remains comfortable in her permanent care. The patient record showed that Catherine Ashford had been discharged to family care in October 1876, but Helena now realized this was a fabrication. Catherine had never left the asylum. Neither had dozens of other patients whose families had made similar arrangements. The most damning evidence came in the form of architectural sketches hidden with the correspondence. Dr. McAllister had designed Room 23 not as a treatment facility, but as a permanent isolation chamber. The drawings showed a windowless room with thick walls, soundproofing, and a complex ventilation system that could be controlled from outside. It was designed to house patients indefinitely, without anyone knowing they were there. Just when the full scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear, Helena made a discovery that chilled her to the bone. The current patient roster included several names that matched the supposedly discharged patients from the 1870s. These individuals had been living in Room 23 for over a decade, forgotten by the world and sustained by a staff sworn to secrecy. Helena confronted Thomas Brennan on a stormy October evening, presenting him with the evidence she had gathered. The head orderly's composed demeanor finally cracked as he realized the truth could no longer be hidden. Dr. McAllister convinced us it was mercy, Brennan said, his voice breaking. These patients would never recover and their families wanted them gone. He said keeping them comfortable and isolated was better than the alternatives they faced elsewhere. The orderly led Helena to the third floor's eastern wing, where he pressed a hidden mechanism that caused a section of the wallpaper to swing inward, revealing a narrow corridor. The air that escaped was stale and carried the faint odor of carbolic acid and human habitation. Room 23 was larger than Helena had expected, with a series of smaller chambers branching off from a central area. The main room contained several pieces of furniture covered in white sheets, while the side chambers were fitted with heavy doors that could only be opened from the outside. The walls were lined with the cork panels mentioned in McAllister's invoices, creating an environment of absolute silence. In the first chamber, Helena found an elderly woman sitting quietly in a chair, her hair completely white and her eyes vacant. A chart at the foot of her bed identified her as Catherine Ashford, admitted in 1874 for acute melancholia. She had been living in this 10 by 12-foot room for 15 years, cared for by a staff who brought her meals and maintained her basic needs, while the world believed she was living peacefully with her family. The other chambers contained similar scenes. Men and women who had been forgotten by society, living in isolation while their families paid for their permanent disappearance. Dr. McAllister's revolutionary treatment had been nothing more than a sophisticated form of imprisonment designed to help wealthy families dispose of their inconvenient relatives. The most disturbing discovery came in McAllister's private study within Room 23. His final journals revealed that he had eventually realized the ethical horror of what he had created, but by then he was trapped by his own conspiracy. The families who had paid for his services would not allow him to change course, and the staff who had helped maintain the deception feared prosecution for their complicity. Helena's decision to expose the truth faced immediate resistance from the asylum's board of directors, several of whom had been aware of the arrangement. Dr. Whitmore revealed that he had been pressured to maintain the conspiracy after Dr. McAllister's death, with threats to his career and family if he spoke out. The revelation that followed Helena's investigation sent shockwaves through Millbrook and beyond. The families who had paid for their relatives' disappearance faced public scandal and legal consequences. The asylum's board was dissolved, and several staff members were prosecuted for their roles in maintaining the deception. The patients found in room 23 were transferred to legitimate care facilities, though their years of isolation had left most of them unable to readjust to normal life. Catherine Ashford, who had been 23 when she was committed, died within 6 months of her liberation. Her body and mind unable to cope with the outside world she had been denied for so long. The McAllister Asylum was closed permanently in 1890, its buildings eventually converted to a tuberculosis sanatorium. The case became a landmark in psychiatric ethics, leading to new regulations requiring independent oversight of private mental health facilities. Helena Morrison continued her career in psychiatry, but was forever changed by her discovery. She spent the rest of her life advocating for patient rights and transparency in mental health treatment. In her memoirs, published in 1923, she wrote, "The greatest horrors are not born of evil intent, but of good intentions corrupted by fear, greed, and the willingness to look away from inconvenient truths." Eerie. The story of Room 23 serves as a reminder that the most dangerous secrets are often hidden in plain sight, protected by those who benefit from their concealment. The families who paid for their relatives' disappearance, the staff who maintained the deception, and the community that chose not to ask difficult questions all played a role in sustaining a system that turned compassion into imprisonment. If this story has given you chills, imagine how many other secrets remain buried in the records of institutions we once trusted without question. What do you think about this dark chapter in medical history? Do you believe all the truth was revealed, or might there be more secrets waiting to be discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to hear more stories about the hidden horrors of history, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Until next time, remember that the past is never as buried as we think it is.